Hello, my name is GC Denwiddie. I am a book blogger, entrepreneur, and speaker, and I want to say thank you for tuning in. Today, I will be reviewing the first book in the Superstar Me series, which was written by Mrs. Dale Wells Marshall, who is a Caribbean author. Specifically, she's from the Bahamas. So I'm very excited to share this review with you. And the title of the first book in the series is called Adanna and the Dog Star. Now let's talk about plot. The plot is a classic plot. It's basically a hero's journey. In the beginning of the story, the main character is having trouble believing in herself, but she goes on a journey, and at the end she realizes, hey, I should have believed in myself the entire time. And what Mrs. Marshall does with this book is that she uses diverse characters to tell that classic plot. Adanna is a young Caribbean girl. She's having trouble adjusting in school. Her father has been lost at sea. She's having trouble dealing with his absence, and she's also being bullied. You know, her mom and grandmother, who stays with her, as well as her young sister, they tell her, not to pay attention to it, but she's really having trouble doing that. So one day she goes to her favorite spot where she used to go with her father, and she looks at the stars, and her doppelganger from the sky emerges and looks at her and takes her on a journey throughout the celestial universe. And she ends up meeting with her father, and at the end of the journey, she realizes, hey, I should have believed in myself, because her father tells her, baby girl, this is what you need to do. I love that family. I love that father-daughter dynamic, because I'm a daddy's girl. And I think the love that Adanna has for her father definitely shows throughout the story. One thing I think could have been improved upon was the build-up to Adanna realizing that she needs to believe in herself. I think it'll be I say it could be improved upon, but I think it depends on what Mrs. Marshall does with this. In the next story, is she going to build on Adanna's story, or is she going to introduce another character? So, those are my initial thoughts, but it'll be interesting to see where Mrs. Marshall goes in the next story. Another thing I liked about this book is Mrs. Wells Marshall obviously has a love for astronomy and stars, and that love comes through the main character, and it doesn't seem forced. So I actually learned a lot from this story through the plot and just some of the things that Adanna notices and observes in the sky, and I think that is interesting in itself. Now let's talk about graphics. The actual cover to the book has my interest piqued. When I first saw it, I was like, oh, okay, why is this cute girl soaring through the sky? And you actually find out why in the book. So I think it was very fitting. One thing I noticed about the graphics, though, let me back up. The book is basically like an easy chapter read. So some of the graphics are like sprinkled in throughout. It's not overwhelming. It's some here, some there. But some of them look computer generated and some of them didn't. It's not off-putting. It's just something that I noticed. I don't think it takes away from the story, but it's something I definitely noticed. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is diversity. I absolutely love this book because it's set in the Bahamas, and it features a Bahamian cast. 4 books that are written in the Caribbean and in African settings. I'm sure that people from those places want those books, and they're there, but you have to search for them. So I just want to send a big up to Mrs. Marshall for writing a Bahamian specific book with the characters and the setting. As an African American, I think that's amazing because it shows the diversity of the diaspora. The next thing about diversity in this book, it shows again a multi-generational family, which is like not the same here. You know, not many people stay with their grandparents in the States. So to see Adanna dealing with that dynamic, I mean, I think that's diverse and that's really interesting. Additionally, I love how she incorporates Bahamian specific things into the book. For instance, even on the cover, the dress that Adanna is wearing is called an Andalusian dress. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that's a print that's made in the Bahamas, and I think that's really cool that she incorporated that into the story. It really piqued my interest, and I actually was Googling it, and I learned a lot from the story just because she embraces the fact that the story is set in the Bahamas, and it makes the reader want to learn more if you're not familiar with the culture. Now, let's talk about themes. There are a lot of great themes in this book that will cause readers who are maybe struggling with some of those issues to kind of relate to. And it also provides a way for people who are sharing this book with the young people to kind of bring up difficult topics. Number one, bullying. Adanna is being bullied. And it's funny, well, not funny, because I mean, it's never funny to be bullied. But some of the insults that the main bully is calling her, he calls her like Bony Maroney. I think that's definitely maybe a Caribbean specific thing, because that's not like an insult here in the States. But it was cool to see kind of the things that, you know, kids deal with in other places as far as bullying. The next thing, with that bullying though, especially at that age, I think the main guy that's bullying her kind of likes her. And so I think it's a great way to kind of talk about feelings young people may have towards each other and how guys show that they like a girl by bullying her. And Adanna is actually like really different. She's kind of hit that growth spurt, so she looks different than people in her class. And Adrian picks on her, but I really think he likes her. So this is the perfect opportunity to kind of discuss that dynamic as you're reading through the book with your young person. The next thing is colorism. That's something that people in the diaspora always deal with, and I think it provides a great way to show that it's all relative and it really doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, it just doesn't matter. Another great theme in this book is going to be science and astronomy. I don't know much about it, but at the end of the book, I knew a lot more than I did. And I think, again, Mrs. Dale does a great job of incorporating that knowledge into the book. And it makes you, well, it really provides an opportunity to learn more about it just from reading this story. Now, Kitability. Again, this is would I recommend this story to someone else? I actually will recommend this story to someone else. And I say that because it's set in the Caribbean. It's set in the Bahamas. And again, that's another great theme to explore. Let me back up. The history of the Bahamas, the culture of the Bahamas, travel, geography. You can throw that theme into this story as well. But it's one of the reasons I would recommend this book. It just goes to show that people live differently in different places. They experience different things in different places. Now, one of my concerns is probably not a major concern. And I think I'm saying this because I do stay in the Bible Belt, and we do have people that are debating if Islam should be taught in schools or not. One of the things that could potentially cause a problem is the fact in one of the scenes, Mrs. Dale discusses that we are made out of the same stuff as stars. For me, that's not a big deal. But for some people in the Bible Belt, that may be a big deal. Now, my final thoughts. I appreciate this book because I learned something. I also love the fact that it's set in a different place. And I also love the fact that you learn so much about the Bahamas just from reading this book, from what they like to eat, from certain things that grow there, to the prints that they like to wear. And I think the fact that I wanted to learn more speaks to Mrs. Dale's gift as an educator. She is a teacher. And so I recommend this book. I think you will learn a lot. But I'm also interested to see where she'll go next, right? Again, is she going to expand Adanna's story, or is she going to introduce another character? You know, it'll be interesting to see. So if you want to know more about other themes in the book and my other thoughts about the book, click on the link in the box, and you will also learn where you can purchase this book through the link as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.